Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GA Fan TV podcast. My name is Aaron. I hope you're keeping wonderfully well indeed. This was episode 21 with Cork and Nemo Rangers senior footballer Luke Connolly. Yeah, first of all, look, listen, big thanks to Luke Connolly for coming on the podcast. You know, definitely one of my favourite footballers on the Cork team, without doubt. And look, listen, it was a very interesting conversation with Luke. Looking back, of course, at Cork's championship last season, the highs of beating one of the favourites in Kerry, but of course, obviously, the massive disappointment in losing to Tipperary as well. So we got Luke's opinion on both of those wins and losses, and really delved into Cork's season, looking at the future of Cork football, whilst also looking back at Luke Connolly's career, of course, playing for Nemo Rangers, playing in All-Ireland club finals, going up against the greatest club side of all time in Corofin, and of course also as well his time playing for UCC. Of course, he won the Sigerson Cup in his time playing for UCC as well. So certainly Luke has a vast experience in his playing days at Cork, and of course still a long way to go as well. So look, listen, big thanks to Luke who came on, and if you could leave a like, subscribe, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the podcast, and yeah, enjoy the video. Okay, so I'm here with Cork footballer Luke Connolly. So we're here obviously to recap last season's championship with Cork, and obviously look back through your time playing, of course, with UCC, Nemo Rangers, the Cork seniors, under 21s as well. But I suppose first of all, how's things been going for yourself, and what's the lockdown been like for yourself?
Yeah, look, I think the third lockdown, is it the third one? I think definitely has probably been the most difficult across the board. The fact that as intercounty we were able to train and play away in the previous lockdown. This one we're probably just like everyone else in that sense. So that kind of one escape that we would have had has been taken away. So yeah, I definitely think between weather, the early evenings, and just not being able to, I suppose, do the one thing that kind of kept us sane previously, taken away from us, has made it difficult. But look, everyone's in the same boat, so it's I have my health, I have my job, so I don't want to get too I suppose self-indulged.
Yeah, I suppose during the last lockdown, definitely having the games there anyway, from a fan point of view and everything else, like, it was definitely, I think, for everyone's mental health, it was brilliant. I suppose at least the good thing is this time around there is other sports as well, I suppose, that can kind of keep us going at the same time. How did you find being back on the pitch, like, kind of in the, I suppose, COVID environment, if you want to call it that, like, with the fact
Like,
that
I'll be perfectly honest. I was one of the people who was skeptical to begin with, and it's not through any personal circumstances. My family are all healthy. There's no underlying health conditions. We haven't been affected by COVID, but I did see the risk, or I kind of saw fellas being put in a position where they probably didn't want to be. So I was skeptical. But I mean, definitely from our own perspective, we had the doc involved, and he kind of kept us on our toes. Fellas were masked up the whole time in the dressing room. There was no hanging around, no spending too much time in people's company. But yeah, after a week or two, I was glad to have it. And in fairness, the regulations were kept fairly tight. That there was no, like, we had no issue with COVID. We had no COVID breakout. No players had it. So that's a credit to our own medical team, but it's a credit to the players as well, being as diligent as they were. So yeah, I definitely forgot my reservations within a week or two of having it.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of them things as well. Like, I mean, I know, like, with I think it was Sligo mainly, that I think they were the only county really that suffered in the championship anyway. Like, I think everyone else was it was kind of good across the board. I suppose looking at, like, your kind of time playing for Cork, like, if we go back to, I suppose, like, when you were playing with the under-20s, like, you had 2 Munster titles in that time. There was a narrow loss to Galway in 2013. Like, what was the experience like playing for the under 21s at that time? Like, a lot of talented players in that team at the time.
Yeah, I would always say it was probably one of the most enjoyable periods with Cork, and I think anyone who played at under 21 would have agreed. It was kind of an in between age where, for I spoke with this previously, for a lot of fellas, it was probably, they knew it was the end of their time as an intercounty player. Fellas who had played underage, under 21, and kind of saw senior being a step too far, or fellas who just didn't see themselves progressing in at that level. So I think there was as much pressure at 21 grade. It was more of an enjoyable period. You had fellas coming through college. You'd fellas, younger, and fellas who kind of were being pulled pillar to post. So there was as much emphasis on training load. Like at minor level, you're nearly training like an inter-county senior team, whereas 21, you were just basically on the pitch Tuesday and Thursday. You were just playing football, and it was very much an enjoyable period. And yeah, as you said, some seriously talented players come through it. Unfortunately, I was on the receiving end of losses to a Kieran Kilkenny Dublin team and a Shane Walsh Galway team. So definitely saw some of our current stars coming through at 21. And it's a grade that I suppose you worry to see it falling away. It seems to be getting younger and younger. Last year was it under 20? I think, are they even looking at it going even younger? And I just think when it was under 21, you had fellas who had that little bit more maturity, who, as I said, some fellas who knew they were coming to the end of their inter-county career or were happy to play 21 and finish. Whereas now, I think there's a lot of pressure and expectation put on younger shoulders, and it can end up ending a fella's career who might have a longer one with just pure load.
Yeah, and I suppose you kind of touched on it there, like coming up against that great Dublin side, Galway side. Like I'd say that was a good lesson for yourself and many of the other Cork lads as well, coming up against players of that quality, like so early on in your playing days.
Yeah, I you know what? Actually, after the Dublin one, I remember we were beaten quite comfortably by Dublin up in Portlaoise, and I kind of thought that was the end for me inter-county wise. I just remember being, as you said, you almost completely outclassed on the day, and just felt way off it. The following year, coming back with again a very enjoyable year, and we lost to a Galway team that had, as I said, Shane Walsh, who had Tom Cron. You'd kind of, I suppose, the base of the Galway team now were playing that day. But yeah, I think I had the appetite back that year, and I felt that I could match or mix it with the best players in the country at that age. So it was probably kept me in it. I was one of the players who wanted to drive on as opposed to step away.
And how does like playing for the under 21s in your opinion like compare with the seniors for Cork?
It's definitely the pressure. There's not half as much pressure. I think it's definitely an age. It's an in between age where it's more pure football, where it's just about enjoyment. Like I said, you've got fellas playing Sigerson, you've got fellas coming into, say, senior with their clubs, and the emphasis is more on getting maybe 2 quality sessions a week and then getting a good game in, as opposed to gym session, getting your weights in, getting fitness done. And as I said, it's kind of an age group where fellas are kind of finding themselves out, figuring themselves out. So I would always say between playing with college and playing under 21 level they're 2 staples of a fella's career. There's stuff you just kind of have to have that help develop you as a footballer. I think on that, with the Sigerson and Fitzgibbon being cancelled this year, I played Sigerson as well as 21 at the same time, and I would always swear by my time at Sigerson probably got me to where I am now. It definitely helped me with the enjoyment levels and rekindling a love again.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and like, would there been any players like even kind of grown up, like I suppose even prior to playing under 21, that you would have looked up to, even, or any kind of inspirations or favorite players or anything like that?
Look, I suppose I never had far to look. I'm in a very privileged place to be with Nemo, and you didn't have to look very far to see idols or legends of Cork football. So I never really had. I remember seeing Colin Corky doing free taking when I was very young, out in the old Nemo, and just seeing fellas like that up close and personal was always a great driver. But even having fellas like Paul Kerrigan, who I ended up playing with up to now, who are fellas that I suppose any Nemo player or any club player should have these fellas in their head as players to aspire to be. So yeah, like I said, I didn't really have far to look. There's probably too many players to name coming through, so and there's probably more like Alan Cronin Senior, James Masters. These are fellas that I looked up to and ended up playing with, and I think playing with them, you understand how good of players they are, even more so, and how important they were to my own career.
Yeah, absolutely. Like definitely with Cork, like they definitely haven't been shy of producing many of a top players like down the years. Like, so I'd say there's definitely a handful of players to choose from. Like, and I suppose you were kind of touching on it earlier there, like with the Sigerson Cup, like obviously in 2014, like that was a huge run for yourself and UCC, like when you beat University of Ulster, like in the final. Like, I'd imagine that was a special moment for yourself as well, because like you were big outsiders, weren't you, just kind of going into that final?
Yeah. Up until, was it the year we beat Corks with the club? I think the Sigerson that year is probably one of my most cherished medals to have. It was just, I think, as you said, we were complete underdogs. Even the semi final we played against. It'll come to me, but they had McBrearty, Michael Darragh McCauley. It was, who was it again? It was a main news, I think. And again, complete underdogs. I think we actually went down to 13 men in that game with a red and a black card. And just getting through that now. Truth be told, I had a very poor game myself that day in the semi, but just getting through that, being part of that group, and then obviously the final and getting that win in the circumstances that it was the only year that they tried out the hooter as well. So I think winning it was even sweeter, knowing that I think there was 10 seconds left and they had a kick out, and we knew they didn't have enough time to get up the field. So winning it in that circumstances as well was even sweeter. But again, and as I've kind of used the term again, I was privileged, in that UCC team. I had Conor Cox, Paul Ganey, Michael Quinlivan, some of the fellas who have been the go-to forwards in football at the moment. So, I as I said, about 21 and Sigerson, you kind of get to develop as a footballer, but definitely with like Sigerson, you get to play with players from different counties, but you really get to test yourself against the best. And you get to play with some of the best. So, I swear by it. It's one of my most cherished memories in the sport. I had 2 more years playing there. We lost another final the following year, and lost to, I think it was the UCD then my final year. But I think you could see teams were getting stronger as over the past couple of years at that level. More players were looking to play at Sigerson, and it was definitely becoming more of a important stepping stone for some of the younger players.
Yeah, I suppose when you even look at colleges like Carlow YT as well, who've went on a great run last year as well. Like I think it's definitely getting way more competitive maybe compared to what I've been previously. And I suppose like with players like Conor Cox, Quinlivan, Paul Ganey in there, like you mentioned, like some of those players obviously hadn't, they were still young players back then as well. So did you even know back then that the likes of Quinlivan, Conor Cox, I know Paul Ganey was very established by then, but could you see them qualities back then that these were going to go on to be top intercounty players as well?
Yeah, definitely. And for different reasons, like MQ, like Quinlivan was always kind of I suppose a Rolls Royce of a footballer. Even in college, everything was effortless. And even the way you see him play this year with Tip against us, unfortunately, it seems so easy for him, to do the extraordinary. And I suppose the big thing with Cox is that he was just relentless. He was an outstanding scorer, but he was just relentless in his pursuit of it too. He treated himself very well. He done his training well, but outside of the pitch, he's a fellow who looked after himself incredibly well, from a physical standpoint. So, I think the 3 of them stood out as fellas who were always going to be big intercounty players who would have great careers. But for me personally, playing in that team as well, and I suppose I felt comfortable playing with these players or players of that quality. So it's definitely something that I benefited from, and gave me the confidence to know that I could, as I said, mix it at that level with those types.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose like who would have been the toughest player, do you reckon, kind of in that running that you would have come up against?
Ron O'Neill in the final probably pulled them back into the game on his own. I remember he scored. There was a gale force breeze down the pitch, and he got the equalising point. I'd say it must have been 50 yards, I'd say, out of his hands. And he was a serious operator that night. Now, he celebrated in an infuriating way after getting the equaliser, so that probably spurred us on a bit. But from a technical standpoint, he was probably the best we played that year.
And like, how important do you think like the Sigerson Cup is for like the development of young players? Like you were saying there earlier, like it was cancelled for this year, and obviously, you know, for obvious reasons, like given the whole world circumstances at the moment. But like, how important do you think it is for, you know, younger players to take it seriously and to actually, you know, compete in it and try give their all in it?
I would put it up there as one of the most important competitions to take part in if the opportunity is there for you, you know. And I was probably in a lucky period where that kind of 2014 to 2017, 2018, when it was probably at the height of the footballing calendar for colleges, and it had its own set weekend, it had its own set period. You know, in the past 2 or 3 years, you've seen the likes of the All Ireland Club and the Provincial Club Championships kind of overlapping with it. You've had the leagues starting earlier and earlier at the intercounty seniors, which again has been pulling players around. So I think it has suffered with scheduling over the past 2 or 3 years. And I think that's leading to, I suppose, younger players not developing or younger players not coming through. So you look at certain counties who are probably suffering for that, where they would have probably had a good production line coming from colleges that's probably stunted a bit at the moment. So I've always sworn by it. I've always told that, like, I had Billy Morgan as a manager in Sigerson, and I've always said that if it hadn't been for Sigerson, I probably wouldn't have moved on to play intercounty football. I was definitely kind of toing and froing it with football at that stage, with other sports. And look, any fellow who goes to college knows there are different influences that come about, and fellas just tend to fall into different careers and different paths. Yeah, I can't speak high enough of it, and it is, from a player who benefited from it, it's you know, it's actually saddening to see how much it has suffered over the past 2 or 3 years.
Mm. And I suppose, like, looking at your club career as well with Nemo Rangers, like, you had 3 Cork titles in there, 2 Munster titles, an All Ireland final appearance in 2018 as well. And obviously you were supposed to be playing in another one as well, but we're not too sure when that's going to happen. But like, what was it like to, I suppose, what's it like to be involved with, you know, the most successful club in Cork? You know, they've obviously won the most Cork senior football titles. So, like, what's it been like, I suppose, you know, coming through that team and being involved with Nemo Rangers?
Look, it's a massive privilege, you know, and I've no doubt every player is proud to play for their club, but yeah, I get a serious sense of pride of being part of that history, as you mentioned there, Joe. The most Cork titles, you know, just to be able to contribute to that is probably enough. You know, there's that cliche when you take a jersey, the intention is to leave it in a better place where you got it. So I think, you know, with clubs like that, you're only wearing the senior jersey for a small period, in the grand scheme of things. So for me, look, as I said, it's just pride to be able to play for a club like that. You know, I look at kind of what we have now in young players coming through, and you just kind of, I'm definitely excited as to what the next 2 or 3 years can bring us. You know, with what we've been developing and some of the young players coming through. But yeah, I suppose that's the one buzzword. I don't want to overuse it, but, you know, pride to be part of a culture that Nemo has is definitely the overwhelming feeling.
Absolutely, yeah, I can imagine so. And I suppose winning that county title in 2017 as well, like, I'd say that was, I suppose, first of all, a proud moment, but I'd imagine a bit of weight off the shoulders as well, because it'd been 7 years since you'd last won one. So I'd say that was a big moment for yourself and for the rest of the lads as well.
Yeah, and look, for myself personally as well, it was from my first big breakout year, from a personal standpoint, performance wise. So yeah, it was a sweet moment for us. You know, and as I said earlier, you don't need to look far at a club like Nemo to see legends of the club, but you also don't need to look far to see fellas who have county medals coming out their back pockets. But those fellas are always quick to remind you that every medal is as important as the next one, and every one is as sweet as the next. So yeah, it was great, but unfortunately, it's something that's bred into us. We kind of have a thirst to get more, and, you know, we try not to dwell too much on winning one and wanting to get another. So that might be a negative, you know, not being able to enjoy it as much as we'd like. But I hope to finish my career with a couple more. So I think I'll be able to look back on it and enjoy them that bit more when I'm finished. But yeah, look, it's something that, don't turn your nose to either. There's clubs that go through careers, and there's players that will never win a county or never get that opportunity. So I'm slow to forget how privileged I am.
Yeah, and I suppose, like when, you've won, like when Nemo Rangers have won as many county, titles as they have, I suppose they're always going to set their sights on an All-Ireland or a Munster. And I suppose for yourself, like coming up against that Corofin side, like one of the greatest club teams of all time, you had many battles against them. Like, what's it been like coming up against them, and how good are they in your opinion?
Well, 2018, the 2017-2018 season, that was we were probably a little bit, I wouldn't say arrogant, but I don't think we understood what we were coming up against. We had watched their semi-final that year was played in, I think they played in horrendous conditions. And they'd got over the line with, I think it was 1 or 2 points only. And they didn't look how they looked on All-Ireland final day, I can assure you. But like you mentioned it, they're probably one of the best club teams, or they might even be the best club team to have done it. They definitely give us a lesson that day, and they've probably brought the club game to a new level. The standards they've set have kind of meant the likes of ourselves. And you look, Ballyboden, likes of Ballymon there last year. These clubs are kind of have nearly an inter-county set up. Some clubs, and we've always prided ourselves at competing when we get out of Cork. At Munster and at All-Ireland level if we get the opportunity. So. Yeah, it was definitely a wake-up call. We had beaten Corks, we had beaten Schlocknail. We probably thought we were, I wouldn't say we thought we were better than what we were, but we probably went in on a big wave of good feeling to be torn down very, very quickly in, I think, the first 10 minutes of an All-Ireland final. So it's definitely a position I never want to be in again. But then we had the joy of facing them again 2 years later in 2019, where again we felt we were better set up, better prepared. But I think one of their biggest traits and one of their biggest attributes has been able to adapt to different styles of games. That was probably a bit more of a dogged battle. And again, they showed us the right way or the better way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like from looking at them myself at times, like they look like, they're some team altogether. And I suppose like looking at like 2020 as well, like, and looking at how that All Ireland Club Championship could have panned out, or the provincials and whatnot. Like obviously Corofin were beaten in the Galway Senior Football Championship. So do you think for yourselves even that moving into 2021 or 2022, like whenever the provincial club championships do come back around, that there is that potential there for yourselves to go on a run again and actually end that way for an All Ireland club title?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. It's definitely something we spoke about. It's not something that we shy away from. There's obviously the intention to win our county and get that sorted first. But I think with the likes of ourselves, and when you do get there, there's probably a window of 4 or 5 years there where you have a group that is probably good enough to get to that level, and you probably won't have many more opportunities after that to get there. So I think we're under no illusion that the clock is ticking on our opportunity to get there again, and to, I suppose, to maybe one day break that gap. But yeah, I kind of had to laugh right a small bit at when the most recent club season ended, and some of the county winners of other counties were saying that they should bring in the provincial clubs or play them. Teams who had not won a county for a couple of years were now looking to get into Munster or Leinster. And we kind of said that there's probably a rite of passage. You probably have to lose the Corofin before you can start asking for a provincial or an All-Ireland series to be set up. So I think we've gone through that rite of passage, and we hopefully get to battle with Corofin gone over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I can imagine so. All right, like it must feel a little unfortunate as well. Like the 1 year they've actually been beaten and that run has actually ended. I mean, they could actually still go and win the 4 in a row, even though they got beat the year previously.
Yeah. I actually haven't looked at it that way, and that's a sobering thought to have, right, to pass on. But yeah, look, as I said, it's definitely something that we've mentioned, but you have to be a county champion to get anywhere first. So it's very much back to square one, and to get over the line in our own county before we start looking at that.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose just one step at a time, I suppose, is the main thing. And you think as well, like obviously, like with the COVID situation, that kind of created like a separate window in many ways for clubs in county. Yeah, do you think that would be something definitely you'd be interested in going forward? Because obviously you're heavily involved with Nemo Rangers, who are normally thereabouts in an All Ireland Club Championship, and obviously Cork are always very competitive, inter-county level. So would that be something as well you'd be highly in favour of?
Yeah, I think if this has shown us above all else that we probably shouldn't, or there should be no reason why we should go back to I suppose, the clustered calendar or the overlapping calendars we had in the past. I think we've proven that you can do it in separate windows and do it quite successful. We definitely, some of us who are, as you say, heavily involved with county and club, who got a full season with the club. It's definitely probably one of the most enjoyable club seasons I've ever been a part of. And that's with COVID in the background, with the unforeseen circumstances. But getting that, I suppose, that window of just pure club training, which is something that we miss out on a lot. And definitely over the past 4 or 5 years when I've been in the county, it's not something you get. You get probably the week before championship, and then depending on when you go to championship, then for the rest of the season. So I'm a big fan of it. I'd love to be able to commit to an inter-county season and then fully commit to a club season rather than being pulled pillar to post. But it's easy for me to say as a player who plays a both. It's probably something. It's a different problem for a club player who's waiting, an extra 3 or 4 months before he plays, or is doing, 2, maybe 3 pre-seasons before they see any championship action. So, yeah, look, it's for the people a lot higher up for them to make those decisions. But for me personally, I think it's the way to go. I don't think we should be going back to an overlapping calendar if possible.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to agree as well. Like, definitely from from a fan point of view and even from a media point of view as well, I think everyone would love to have that separate window. So either gets the attention it deserves. Like, I suppose for yourself as well, like when you did make it through onto the Cork senior team, like what was it like when you did make that first appearance for the Cork seniors? Because I remember you were saying earlier about kind of that gap between the under-20s and the seniors. So what was that like?
I'll be perfectly honest. I struggled. I struggled big time making that transition. I came in when Brian Cupper was manager, back in, I'd say it was 2013, 2014, and kind of struggled, to be honest. And at the time, I put it down to the manager not liking me, or I played with Nemo. Maybe that was the case. As I progressed in my career and look back on it, I sometimes can't believe I thought I'd get anywhere with the way I was probably training or with the way I was approaching the game. So I definitely struggled. Coming through, I think it was only, I say it was 2016 really when I first kind of made the breakthrough or started to get it, for want of a better term. Got kind of a full club or a full league campaign under my belt, under Pater Healy, and my first championship season didn't end how I liked. I ended up playing 40 minutes out of 4 games. So again, I was very much in, what am I doing wrong? Where is this going? So it was only, I'd say, 2017 when really this kind of clicked for me personally, where I got a kind of a clean run at the team and probably established myself as one of the I suppose I wouldn't say one of the better players, but established myself as an intercounty footballer, who belonged. So yeah, it definitely took me a small period out after 21 to kind of bridge that gap, which is probably why I alluded to the pressure is falling under Joe under 20 and minor, that year is getting younger and younger. That it's a massive step up from that age to senior now. From a physicality standpoint, but from a pure lifestyle and the workload that it is. And I think there is a lot of emphasis on younger players coming through. We had a couple of them this year come through from an under 20 team that won All Ireland. And when you come from that kind of a high and you're coming into a senior intercounty panel, you're almost expected to make that step straight away. And if you looked at the tip game in the Munster final this year, you can see that it's not that easy to make that step. Where we had a few under 20 lads probably struggled a little bit. And that's probably just down to more experienced players coming up against, a tip team that have been around the block, have been to an All-Ireland semi-final not so long ago, and have that bit of, I suppose, tactical nous at senior level. So yeah, I as I said, I struggled coming on, but I suppose I'm confident to say now that I feel I belong at this level, and hopefully have another couple of years left of me.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and I suppose like you were touching on that there with the Tipperary game, and like how would you reflect, I suppose, on Cork's championship season in 2020 in an overall sense? Like definitely some great moments as well, like winning every game in Division 3, beating Kerry. Obviously, the Tip game was probably a huge setback for Cork. Like, but how do you reflect on it yourself?
Yeah, like you kind of touched yourself there. If you look at it from a competitive standpoint, and if you just put it down on paper, we lost one competitive game in the season. You know, we won all the league games. We beat Kerry in the Munster semi, and unfortunately lost the Tip in a final. You know, and look, these in finals, you know, these things do happen. You do lose. You know, that is what a final is there for. You know, one team wins, one team loses. I wouldn't read too much into it. You know, I think last year when we played the Super 8s, you know, we had good showings against Tip, or not Tip, sorry, good showings against Tyrone in Dublin, where we were in the game for 60 minutes and fell away. We played a Roscommon game that probably didn't reflect the year we had, given the circumstances for both of us. And then this year, up as far as when we beat Kerry, you know, we'd probably shown the progression. And it was probably a culmination of 2 years of hard work to get that I suppose that notable win against a top four side. And then unfortunately, look, as you said, it ended in a disappointment. And I've seen different terms or people's opinions of the year, and I think one of the words I heard was embarrassing, which I thought, considering it an embarrassment, is an embarrassing way of looking at it. You know, because you know, we had the huge win against Kerry. We've made great strides from where we were. You know, 3 years ago, I remember losing to Tyrone up Portlaoise by, I'd say it could almost be by 20 points, and wondering where are we going with this. So I think we've built a massive base to build on, and I'm hugely excited for what we can do this year. You know, and I think there's a few wrongs we can right this year, and we also have a big win against Kerry in our back as well, which will stand to us when we go there this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and I think maybe in the moment, I think maybe some people were looking at the defeat for Cork as quite disappointing. But I think definitely when you look at the overall season, and then I think when you look at the fact that Tipperary, they've some serious forwards on that team as well, and a very experienced team in many ways. Like even players like Brian Fox and whatnot, like players that have been around the block for quite a long time. And I suppose, like, when you look back at the league run, like, I suppose, do you think that was good for yourselves as well to build that winning mentality, like, back in the league as well after a disappointing year previously, like winning every game? And I suppose, you know what they say, like, winning breeds confidence. So I suppose that was, I'd imagine that was great for yourselves as well.
Yeah, and it's something that I suppose we hear a lot with the club, with Nemo, and it's that kind of, you know, winning is a habit, you know, and it's something that you can only beat what's in front of you. And as you said, winning breeds confidence. If you're winning games, you know, regardless of how you're winning them or who you're winning them against, you know, at the end of the day, it's a win. And it's definitely something that feeds in, and there's a kind of a feel-good factor around the group. You know, and definitely through the league campaign, I've been in previous league campaigns where the feeling is not good. You know, I was on the end of 2 relegations, and you know, we struggled on different years with form and with players, and definitely being part of a league campaign where you're winning games was new, but it also added to the group, added to the feeling. Fellas were looking forward to coming into training, and it was something we could build on. And I think that's the biggest thing, you know, having something to build on, as opposed to, you know, back in the days we were losing, you were nearly tearing it apart or looking for reasons as to why. Yeah, as I said, look, you can only beat what's in front of you. And to go back to your earlier point as well on the fact that Tip and experienced players, I think the gap between, I suppose that, we wouldn't say the middle tier, but you've got the likes of the Dublins at the top, and then you've kind of got nearly everybody else at the moment. I think the gap has really shrunk between these teams, you know, like the Tip. Definitely in Munster, you look at how Limerick performed against Tip, probably should have beaten them. Clare probably very disappointed with the year they went, you know, would have probably been seen as maybe even the second best team in Munster, looking at their league form over the past couple of years. So yeah, I don't think the gap is as big as it was at all. I think Munster's going to be definitely competitive this year, looking at the performances last year of the likes of Tip, ourselves, Kerry, and Limerick and Clare have definitely want to right the wrongs of last year. So yeah, and I think across the board as well, you look at some of the other smaller counties, we'll say, if COVID has done anything, it's been a great leveler for teams, you know, where they've been able to build on, and I think it's definitely a competitive championship coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we definitely see in the year, like I suppose with Tip winning and with Cavan winning as well, that like the gap probably isn't as big as what people actually think it is. And I suppose for yourselves, like looking at that Kerry win as well, like that was obviously something that no one really expected too much. I think everyone had Kerry down as maybe the team to even beat Dublin in the All Ireland that year. So, like, what was the preparation like leading up to that game? And I suppose, like, were you surprised in some ways of, I know conditions definitely played a big part, but how defensive Kerry were in some ways? Because, you know, coming into that game, I know they played a little bit defensive in the league, but I think everyone thought, you know, they're going to play the way that Kerry normally plays. So what was your kind of take on it?
Yeah, I suppose to begin with, when we got the date of the game, I think it was November 8th. And that had been put in the diary very early in the year. It was everything was going to culminate to that game, and we had a set point as to when we needed to peak. So I think even for the neutrals, or for I do a bit of work in Kerry with my line of work as well. So I think everyone was looking at that date and had it marked down as the one to look forward to. So we had plenty of time to prepare. And then go into the game, as you said, and the fact that you said it, I suppose, speaks volumes that Kerry did set up extremely defensive. And I actually remember I was next to Paul Kerrigan, who was on the bench, and when we saw that Brian Begley was starting at wing forward, and look, with the great respect to Begley, he's an excellent defender, but when we going into that game as underdogs, we were seeing a Kerry team who had almost been crowned already by some of the media, were starting with an extra defender. I suppose it almost got our tails up. We said they're worried here, or they're either not focusing on us, they're planning for something on the line. So we kind of felt we had an opportunity to catch them. And I think if you remember in the game, the first goal chance of the game actually went to Kerry and it went to Begley. I think he put it straight at Mihal. So again, I think it was another thing that it got our tails up. Big save for Mihal, but also if you would put a Stephen O'Brien or any number of forwards in that position, it was probably a goal and a very different night.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I definitely think maybe they kind of went in and probably showed maybe too much respect, I think, going into that game, maybe in some ways, like, and obviously like that last minute goal as well, like last minute of extra time. Like I'm sure like you'll say it wasn't a pass, but it obviously drops into Mark Keane and he puts it in the back of the net. Like imagine that was there's not many better ways you can be carried than that, I'd imagine.
No, and look, I've been on the receiving end of one. We lost to Clonmel Commercials in 2015 in the Munster final, very similar to that, where Michael Quinlan got a goal with the last kick of the game. And as you said, I don't think there's a better way to win. I don't think there's a worse way to lose. So I think given the magnitude of the game, the opponents, it's definitely one of the sweetest feelings I've ever had after a game. I think the only one that would compare to it is probably beating Schlockneil in 2018 in the All-Ireland semi in extra time. So, but I think the outpouring of emotion, and I think what it meant to the county itself, I don't think fellas understood. Given COVID, given the circumstances, I think the amount of people who ended up watching the game because of being stuck at home, I think it just gave a massive lift. And probably to our detriment, 2 weeks later when we faced Tip, I think fellas were probably still on a high from that game, or we were still riding that wave, we'll say. So look, it's definitely one that, and I haven't had many memories to cherish in a Cork jersey yet, but it's definitely one that I will definitely remember for a long time.
And do you think now that you've beaten Kerry, that like the gap in Munster that I think everyone always thought was there between Kerry, Cork, and Tip and Clare and etc. Like, do you think now that, because I think a lot of people are saying like Cork, that was their big opportunity and they missed their chance, but like what do you think personally? Do you think now that maybe you got that win over Kerry that you could easily beat them again? Like it's no given that either could happen, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I think it's something that we have to believe ourselves. It's not something that anyone else is going to give us. We've gotten a big result against Kerry. We've beaten them, and I think the next step for us is to actually realise that we are a team that can do that, and we are a team that should be competing at that level. We have excellent caliber of players. We've shown that we can input a system that can beat a top four team. So I think, look, that's completely up to us. It could be very easy for us to go out this year and fall into our shell again and end up losing, by 10 or 15 points like we've done in the past. So I think it's something that we have to drive on. We've had 2 years now where Super 8s, probably had a few moral victories in that we played well against top sides, didn't get the result, got a big result last year, and that window to progress is there for us now, and either we go through it or we could end up falling away for another couple of years. So I think that's something that's on our shoulders now. And no one else is going to do it for us.
And I suppose, like, looking at that Tipperary game as well, like, what do you think ultimately it was that kind of led Tip to get over the line? Do you think it was the experience of that Tip team, or maybe, you were kind of just on that massive high after that Kerry win, or what do you kind of ultimately put it down to?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few factors. I do think there was an element of coming in on a high after a big win like that, and trying to get yourselves up again for a big game, which I suppose, look, some people might say there's no excuse. Given that it was a final, you shouldn't have any issue getting yourself up. But I think the emotion and I suppose what 2 weeks ago had taken out of us going into it, it definitely, we looked flat to begin with. I think there was an element of, look, we went in with a few younger players who probably didn't understand, I suppose, one, how good Tip can be, and two, I think look, if you're a younger player coming through and you're here in a much final with Tip, you take it almost as a given you're going to win that, and that's kind of an archaic view, but it's something that was in the past, was set in stone. You nearly always were going to beat Tip. So I think, look, it was just, we had young players not used to that. We had the high of the Kerry game, and at the same time, I think, look, Tip played an excellent game. They tactically got it right. They stopped their attacks when they need to. They completely hammered us on the breaks for the kick out, which, if you look at any game, any victory, the breaks are usually where it starts. The performance of Connolly in the midfield, I think he actually won his own break twice near the end. That killed us. And look, we made mistakes that we hadn't done in the Kerry game and that we hadn't done all year. We kind of fell back into our old traits. Taking wrong shot options, overcomplicating it going forward, and it just all kind of, I suppose, it all multiplied together, and look, we just looked flat. And Tip, in fairness, I think one of the big elements for Tip as well is they were enjoying themselves. You could just see playing against them that they just looked like they were. I think one of the most damning indictments of how we played, or I suppose one of the most upsetting things, is listening to, I think it was a Conor Sweeney after the game saying it was one of the most enjoyable games he's ever played. And you could see that. And from a forward's point of view, if you can go out of the game thinking that it's that enjoyable, you're going to score. You're going to score comfortably, and you're more likely going to win. So, I think it was a combination of a few things, but, at the end of the day, it's a final. These things happen, and I'm not trying to paint over it, but, I'm not going to be ashamed or embarrassed of losing a final at any level, regardless of opposition.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and I suppose in many ways, probably what it boiled down to as well is, when you're seeing Quinlivan, like, hitting, some of the points of his life, and they, those Tipperary lads, they definitely did look like they were playing without pressure, I suppose, in many ways, and maybe for the Cork lads as well, with the fact that, you probably weren't used to playing under any pressure up until that point. So maybe that was kind of something that factored into it as well.
Yeah, maybe, like you said, going into the Kerry game, we knew all the pressure was on them. There was no one focusing on us, and I suppose going in after beating Kerry, very similar to like how when we beat Slaughtneil with Nemo and went into the game against Corofin, a lot of the press focused on us, given that we had taken out two of the previous champions, and then were completely outclassed, or probably went in with our heads in the wrong place. So, and as you mentioned, I think I remember one of Quinlivan's scores was he hit one with the outside of his right by the sideline. That just, I don't even know if he meant it, but it sailed between the posts, and I just, it was just one of those days where whatever they kicked, I think I remember one of their midfielders went to play a ball in, and I think he sliced it, and then ended up splitting our defence and hitting Conor Sweeney 50 yards away. And it was one of those things that the writing was really on the wall. Dare I say it?
Yeah, and I suppose looking ahead to 2021 as well, I'd imagine that's like a big motivation now as well, I suppose, to right that wrong and come back, fighting harder going into Division 2 and then going into the Munster Championship in 2021, whenever it does go ahead, of course.
Yeah, and look, I suppose the big thing I try to get across especially with the circumstances we're under now, is there shouldn't be any pressure of fellas going back, or I think on the far side of this lockdown, fellas, you shouldn't be going into a game worried or going into a season. I don't think I'm going to not enjoy going training for a very long time after this, or going in with worrying about what other fellas are doing or worrying about tactics and stuff. I think it's very much going to be trying to play as good as you can, get the most out of it, and enjoy as much as you can, because as we've seen, at the drop of a hat, it can be taken away from you. But I think one of the biggest things is that enjoyment factor. And look, if you're not enjoying it, and if you can't see motivation at this point, you probably shouldn't be there. Especially with what we've gone through.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and looking at that league campaign, I suppose it's upcoming. Like, you'll be, I suppose, most likely in a group with Kildare, Laois, and Clare. Like, so how do you see that? Like, I suppose you could probably look at it as the easier side of the groups, with the fact Mayo are on the other side. But yeah, I suppose it still will be tough. Like, but how do you kind of reckon is what fair going into that?
Yeah, look, I definitely don't see it as being the easier side. We lost to Kildare in Newbridge a couple of years ago, and Ennis has never been a good hunting ground for some of us over the past number of years with club and county. So look, I don't see any easy game, but at the same time, it's probably the most excited I've been to go into a season. I think the way it's set up this year as well, it's with the two groups of four. I think it's a very enjoyable system. I think it's going to have, you're going to have your three games, but yeah, I think there's a kind of a tournament outlook to it. There's a tournament feel to it, and we've shown in last year that tournament kind of approach can work well, and is probably an enjoyable way of doing it. So yeah, like I said, there's no look. It's all excitement. It's all looking forward to it. There's no anxiety towards it. There's no worrying about this, that, or the other. I think it's just getting out there and wanting to train and play.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think as well the fact that there'll probably be no dead rubber games or no games getting postponed or anything like towards the end. I think it's it's one or the other. It's either promotion or relegation for most counties anyway. Like what do you kind of see as a realistic goal as well for Cork in 2021? Like, when you look at it in overall context of the All-Ireland Championship, like, do you think winning a Munster is the goal, or do you think going on a run through the qualifiers, or what do you reckon?
No, look. First and foremost, the winning a Munster, that has to be the aim. If it's not, there's not much point to being there, and it, I think 2 years ago, I remember we had a sports psychologist came in, he asked the question, who here thinks we can win All Ireland, and I'll be perfectly honest, there wasn't many hands going up, and straight away he said, look, that's a fairly damning indictment of the group. I think every team should set out with an intention to win All Ireland, whether it's realistic or not. You have to have an ultimate goal of being there. So look, we're under no illusion. There's an opportunity there for us. I think, as I said, it's going to be a competitive Munster Championship, but we see ourselves as one of the teams that can go on and win it. And I wouldn't, I wouldn't pigeonhole us into qualifiers or saying, look, oh yeah, we just want to have a good run. Look, we want to win silverware. There's a few of us have been around a couple of years now, and we're not getting any younger. We've realistically just nearly lost a season in terms of a year of age there. Like, so I'm certainly not looking to stay around much longer before I see some form of silverware. So yeah, the intention is to win what we can, and from a league's perspective, getting up to Division 1 is a realistic goal, I think, especially with the way the system is, a group of four, and then you're playing a semi and a final. I definitely think we shouldn't be going in with any reservations.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and I think when Ronan McCarthy was saying as well, like, and he wouldn't be here if he didn't think they could win an All Ireland in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think definitely, like, with some of the young players as well coming through, like, what have you made of them? Like, and obviously you were touching on it earlier, like, won the 20 championship last year, well, in 2019, and then won the minor championship as well. So what have you made of some of the young lads that have been coming through at the moment?
Yeah, look, there's definitely serious talent there. I think if you look at the performance of Sean Meehan gave this year against Kerry, he probably came out of nowhere. No one would have probably spoken about Sean before the game, and gave a man of the match performance against Kerry. I think a lot of them they're fearless, and it probably stood to them against Kerry, and it probably worked against them against Tip. So there are fellas that came in with no real opinion or reservations about who they're playing, or with no real, I suppose, idea what they're going up against. And in a game against Kerry like that can really stand to a fella who's, Maura Shanley came up against David Clifford, and didn't blink, which was a huge testament to his character coming through as a young player. From a force perspective, you look at the performances of Connolly in the league campaign. He definitely showed that he can mix it at this level. From a kicking perspective, he's definitely one of the better younger lads I've seen come through. That year at the under-20s, he was fairly automatic from scoring. So I think he was unfortunate coming back with injury that he kind of missed out and probably was on the outskirts when we got to the Munster final. So I think he's definitely looking to kick on this year. Colin McCallan is another player who, from a physical perspective, is well within his comfort zone at senior level. I've seen him throw around a few of the older lads quite easily. So another fella who probably struggled in the tip game and is another fella who's looking to kick on and right some wrongs. Mark Cronin, a club mate of mine who was involved this year, is another fella who has shown at club level anyway that he can perform well at senior. So I think like I said, it's definitely one of the most exciting teams I've been involved in. I think there's a great blend, and it's kind of come out of nowhere that I'm one of the senior players now. It wasn't long ago that I was one of the younger players coming through, or one of the more inexperienced. So it's not long coming around when you're the one there needing to show examples. So it's definitely been a learning curve for a few of us.
Perfect. Yeah. No, like I think time definitely goes by very, very quickly indeed. Well, look, listen, cheers anyway, Luke, for coming on, and look, listen, best of luck this year with the championship, and best of luck with the league anyways. And I appreciate your time for coming on.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to this podcast with Luke Connolly. I do hope you enjoyed very much indeed. And of course, big thanks to Luke Connolly who came on the show. Had a great conversation with him, of course, looking back at Cork's time last season in the championship and so on. And I do hope everyone enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and follow on Spotify and on social media. All the links are in the description down below. Next week I'll be speaking with Antrim hurler Conor McCann, so do stay tuned for that, and of course many other podcasts to come further down the line as well. So look, listen, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Saturday, and I'll speak to you soon.